In the countryside, darkness hides more than silence. Before we begin, if you enjoy these true stories, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale. Today, I'm bringing you 4 disturbing experiences from people living in rural areas, isolated places, solitary homes, where the nearest help is miles away, and where, when night falls, you're completely alone. My name is Robert, and I'm 58 years old. I'm a cattle rancher in Montana. I have a ranch that's been in my family for 6 generations, 3,000 acres of land, the main house, 3 barns, corrals. The nearest house is 14 miles away. I've lived alone since my wife passed 7 years ago. I like the solitude of ranch life, or I did, until what happened in February 2019. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. It was a freezing night, around 1 in the morning. I woke up to the sound of the cattle. They were making noise, upset about something. This happens sometimes when there's a predator around, a mountain lion or bear. I got dressed, grabbed my rifle and flashlight, and went out. The main barn is about 100 yards from the house. As I walked across the snow-covered yard, I noticed something strange. The air smelled wrong. Not the usual smell of cattle or hay. It was sweet, like rotting flowers, a smell that shouldn't be there in the middle of winter. The cattle were all pressed against the far wall of the barn, all facing the same direction, toward the entrance, completely still. That was the problem. They weren't moving, just staring, fixed, like they were hypnotized. I pointed my flashlight where they were looking. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw her. A woman, standing there, right in the barn entrance, completely motionless. She was wearing a long white nightgown that went down to her feet, long black hair hanging loose, very pale skin, and she was barefoot, in the middle of Montana winter with snow on the ground, barefoot. "Hello?" I called. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" No response. She just stared at me, or in my direction. Her eyes were strange, dark, empty. Close your eyes and imagine this with me. You're alone on your ranch. It's 1 in the morning. You find a stranger in your barn, barefoot in the snow, not saying a word, just staring at you with dead eyes. "Ma'am, are you lost? There's a town about—" Before I could finish, she moved her head slowly, side to side, like saying no, but her eyes never left me. I took a step back. Something about her made my skin crawl. She wasn't normal. Nothing about her was normal. I'm going to call someone to help you," I said, backing toward the house. She took a step forward, her bare feet on the frozen snow. No sign of pain, no shivering. The cattle started making noise again, a sound I'd never heard before. It wasn't fear, it was terror. I ran back to the house, didn't look back, didn't want to see if she was following. Got inside, locked the door, closed all the windows, called the sheriff. They arrived 40 minutes later. By then, it was getting light. They searched the entire property, found nobody. But there were footprints in the snow, bare feet, walking from the woods to the barn, and then back to the woods. The prints stopped abruptly in the middle of the woods, like she'd simply vanished. I didn't sleep that night, and every night since then, I check all the doors and windows 3 times before bed, because I know she's still out there, in the woods, waiting. And some nights when I look out the window, I think I see her, standing among the trees, looking toward the house, in that white nightgown, those dead eyes, barefoot in the snow.
But Robert's experience isn't the only one I've heard from rural folks. Recently, I met Sarah, a 39-year-old woman who works as a caretaker on a farm in Vermont. What happened to her during her night rounds showed her that some old farmhouses hold more than memories. Sarah works on a historic farm near Burlington. It's an 18th century property with a huge main house and several outbuildings. The owners only come on weekends. The rest of the time, Sarah's alone, taking care of the property. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. It all started in August 2020. Sarah was doing her usual night rounds around 11, walking through the main house, checking doors and windows. She got to the second floor, to the west wing that's rarely used. That's when she heard the music. A music box, tinkling softly, coming from one of the locked rooms. Sarah stopped. That room had been locked for months. The owners never used it. It was a storage room for antique furniture. She approached the door. The music continued. An old-fashioned melody, slow, the kind a 19th century music box would play. She tried the handle. Locked. "Hello?" she called. "Is someone there?" The music stopped. Sarah waited. Total silence. Then, from inside, she heard footsteps. Light footsteps, like a child's, walking toward the door. The handle started moving. Someone was trying to open from inside. Leave a like if you're enjoying this, and tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something paranormal in the countryside or any isolated place? I'd love to read your story. Sarah backed up. Her heart was pounding. "Who's there?" Silence. The handle stopped moving. Sarah ran downstairs, got the master key set, and came back. Opened the door slowly. The room was dark. Sarah turned on her flashlight. Furniture covered with white sheets, stacked boxes, dust everywhere. And on a small table in the back, an antique music box, closed. Sarah approached, opened the box. Inside was a porcelain ballerina. Sarah wound it up. The box started playing, the same melody she'd heard before. But when she'd heard it before, the box was closed and the room was locked. Sarah closed the box, left, locked the room again. But that wasn't the last time. Every night, at the same hour, the music started. Sarah learned to ignore it, until the night the music stopped, and instead she heard a voice, a girl's voice, singing the same melody. Sarah went to investigate again, opened the room. This time, there was something different. In the dust on the floor, there were footprints, small footprints, a girl's feet, walking from the music box to the door. Sarah researched the house's history, found that in 1889, the owner's daughter, a 9-year-old girl named Emily, had died in that room from scarlet fever. Her favorite music box was stored in the room after her death. Sarah still works at the farm, but she doesn't do night rounds on the second floor anymore. And every time she passes that room, she listens, always listens, for the music, or the singing, or the footsteps. Emily's still there, in her room, with her music box, 135 years later. And speaking of presences that remain, I have to share what happened to David, a 42-year-old park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains. During his night patrols in the deep woods, he found something that shouldn't exist in these lands. David works as a ranger in a remote section of the Appalachian Trail. He covers thousands of acres of wilderness. His work often takes him to isolated areas. Sometimes he spends nights in ranger cabins miles from civilization. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. It was October 2021. David was in an isolated cabin, more than 20 miles from the nearest town, an old log cabin that rangers had been using for decades. It was around midnight. David couldn't sleep. He went outside for some air. The forest was silent, too silent. No animals, no wind, just silence. Then David heard something, a rhythmic sound, like metal hitting wood, an axe chopping a tree. But it was midnight. Nobody chops trees at midnight. David grabbed his flashlight, walked toward the sound. About 300 yards from the cabin, he saw a light, an orange glow, like a fire. He approached carefully and saw a scene that shouldn't exist. A camp, military tents, a fire, and men. About a dozen men in uniforms, but not modern uniforms, Civil War era uniforms. The men were sitting around the fire, talking, laughing. One of them was chopping wood for the fire. David hid behind a tree, watching. The men seemed real, solid, not translucent or ghostly, just soldiers around a fire. You'd feel your heart pounding. You'd wonder if you're dreaming, if this is real. These men, these uniforms from over a century and a half ago, right there in front of you. One of the soldiers looked up, looked directly at David. Their eyes met. The soldiers stood up, said something to the others. They all stood, looking toward David. David started backing away. The soldiers started walking toward him, slowly, in formation. David ran, back to the cabin. The soldiers followed. He could hear their boots on the forest floor. He reached the cabin, locked himself inside, looked out the window. The soldiers were there, forming a circle around the cabin, all watching him, expressionless. Then one of them spoke. David couldn't make out all the words, but he caught some, an old southern accent. "Stay inside," the soldier said. The soldiers stayed there all night, standing guard. At sunrise, they disappeared, like they'd never been there. David left the cabin, searched for evidence. Nothing. No boot prints, no fire ashes, nothing. He researched later, found that during the Civil War, this area had been the site of a Confederate camp in 1863, over 160 years ago. And several Confederate soldiers had died in these woods, killed in a Union raid. David thinks he saw their ghosts, stuck in a loop, repeating the same night, over and over, 160 years later. He avoids that area now, because he knows they're still there, those dead soldiers, standing guard in a war that ended over a century and a half ago. And to close out these unsettling rural accounts, I want to share Jennifer's experience. She's a 34-year-old veterinarian who works in rural areas in Kentucky. What she discovered at an abandoned farm showed her that some animals never leave, even after death. Jennifer is a rural vet. She takes care of farms in a 50-mile radius. She's used to night emergencies, isolated farms, working alone. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. It was January 2023. Jennifer received an urgent call. A cow in distress at a farm near Lexington. The address was an old farm Jennifer thought she knew, or thought she did. She arrived around 11 p.m. The farm was dark, no lights. Jennifer honked. Nobody came out. She called the number that had contacted her. No answer. Strange, but the cow might really be in danger. Jennifer took her equipment, walked to the barn. The door was open. Inside, she turned on her headlamp and immediately saw something was wrong. The barn was old, very old, dilapidated, like nobody had used it in years. Cobwebs everywhere, rotted hay, empty broken stalls. But in the back, in the last stall, there was a cow, lying down, breathing heavily. Jennifer approached. The cow looked at her with strange eyes, glassy, empty. Jennifer started her examination. The cow was cold, too cold, and its pulse. Jennifer couldn't find a pulse. She backed away. Something was really wrong. That's when she heard the other animals, sounds coming from other stalls, but those stalls were empty. She'd seen them. Jennifer shined her light around and saw in each empty stall animals, cows, horses, pigs, all lying down, all watching her with those same glassy eyes. They weren't real. They were translucent, like projections or ghosts. Jennifer ran out of the barn, ran toward her car, but before she could reach it, she heard a voice. "Thank you for coming." She turned. A man stood in front of the barn, old, wearing worn farmer's clothes. "They need help," the man said. "They died long ago, in a fire. But they don't know they're dead. They're waiting for someone to come help them." Jennifer didn't know what to say. "Now you've come," the man continued. "Now they know that someone cared about them, even after all these years." The man smiled sadly. "I'm sorry I brought you out here, but I had to, for them." Then he disappeared, like he'd never been there. Jennifer researched. This farm had burned in 1975. The fire killed all the animals, and the farmer. He died trying to save them. Jennifer never went back to that farm, but she often thinks about those animals and that farmer, 50 years after their deaths, still together, waiting for someone who cares. If you made it this far, leave a comment telling me which story impacted you most. And if you know someone who enjoys these tales, share the video. See you in the next one.